Okay, today I intended to make a video on feminism or feminist criticism. The particular topic of discussion I intended to make was gynocriticism. As a Master of English student, we get to learn or read through many literary theories. So this somehow has kind of benefited me to some extent, I might say, because some of the theories are pretty interesting, like feminism, Marxism. These are very interesting. I find gynocriticism is one of the most interesting things I have come across, and it is a theory that has been propounded by Elaine Showalter. Now, Elaine Showalter and how gynocriticism is like how it affects feminism and how is feminism linked with gynocriticism. I should be describing it in this video, and I think I might make a part 2 of this video explaining what is feminism and what a whole feminist theory of it, whole feminist history, how it came about. But for this video, I'm just focusing on gynocriticism as propounded by Elaine Showalter. So I have this article open on my laptop where we have things written on Elaine Showalter, and these things are written in a very jotted form. It gives me more, helps me to focus on things written by Elaine Showalter. So Elaine Showalter is an American critic and who is famous for her conceptualization of gynocriticism. This is a very woman-centric approach, a woman-centric literary analysis, which is like literature for a long period of time had been written from men's perspective. Even women's literature, which we so-called term as women's literature, for a long period of time, for centuries, have been written from a man's perspective. How women feel, how the men think women feel. So this is what is Showalter addressing, that women's writing should be addressed by a female person, because no matter how a man is unbiased or is open, there are some things that a female can less relate to or reciprocate. For example, if you take the queer literature, for example, being a allied person or being a non-queer person, somebody is like a third person narrative. Like when somebody is writing a book on a queer literature and that person is not a queer person, it's like a third person narrative. But if a queer person is writing from that perspective, that becomes more relatable, more real. I'm not saying that if you're a man and you're writing a woman's literature, that is not relatable, or if you are a cisgendered person and if you're writing about queer literature, that is not at all readable or relatable. That's not it. But I'm talking about the reality about the fact, of the more relatability of the fact. So, and in her book, A Literature of Her Own, Showalter has divided the phases into 3 phases. Like feminism had come in different phases. It was not just a whole gush of wave coming into it. So the first phase was the first phase of feminism was feminism as a correspondence of gynocriticism or feminist literature, was women used to imitate the dominant tradition, and that dominant tradition was like the women used to imitate how the men used to write. So men were the dominant sex, and still are. So women tended to dominate how the men used to write in literature, if that makes sense. I think I can make myself clear if I am just not, I'm really not acquainted with cameras, but let's say myself, women were the first phase, which was from 1840 and 1880. It was called the feminine phase, and that's the phase where women, it was called a phase of imitation, because what is imitated? Women writers are imitating things from the male writers, because women writers were never allowed or never given the scope to write something from their perspective, because women were the mute voices or the minority. If you think from a very colloquial perspective, it's called a minority. There were two groups at that time, the mute voice and the dominant voice. So the muted voice were like the women, the female group, and the dominant voice was the male group. So whatever is written by the dominant voice, by the dominant group, is taken as the ultimate truth. So if a man writes that women are foolish, supposedly, for example, now I shall be using Bengali in these videos, because although I'll be talking mostly in English, but Bengali being my native language, it makes myself easier to relate, to talk to people. So all the men were the all the men, for example, a man tells that a particular woman is a foolish person, and they write a book about it. Or if you have somebody has read about Samuel Richardson, Pamela, or which is a very hilarious story and a very ridiculous story about it. So a woman being raped by a person, and then woman getting married to her the person who is raping her. It's a very hilarious, but that's the point I'm taking. People read that problematic thing. People had no objection to that problematic thing, since it was written by a dominant voice. Now, the muted group in that part of the world is trying to write something, but is not gaining the that agency. And most of the times women did not write in their real names. They had to take on pseudonyms, male pseudonyms. For example, George Eliot. She was a woman, but she had to take a male pseudonym. I'm giving this example of feminine literature, feminist phase. These are something that has, these changes are something that has taken place in the field of literature. Okay, and also what changes literature? Literature is greatly impacted. Literature is greatly affected by the political changes, by the social changes that comes with it. The second phase of feminism, or the feminist phase, what we know about it, it largely extends from 1880 to 1920. Now this is a phase where women largely protested for their voting rights, and they got their voting rights, they won their voting rights because before that women did not have their voting rights. They weren't allowed to vote. The universal adult franchise. And the third phase from 1920 to 1960 is a time when women are writing. Like women are writing, and this is a phase where there is actual self-awareness, Women are writing from their perspective. They are teaching people. They are making people knowledgeable about their worlds, their perspective, how like how a marriage affects a woman, how pregnancy affects women, what is a woman's sexuality. Because for centuries it has been taken that women do not, like, there's nothing known as women's pleasure. It's like, what is a woman's pleasure? Women do not own their sexuality, or this concept of women's pleasure has been very much unknown to people. But if you find now in the 21st century or the late 20th century, there are lot of studies to understand a woman's sexuality. That the act of sex is just not an act of sex for women. It's an act of pleasure. It's an act of connection. So this is something that has not been studied in the past years. So women's writing, when women are writing from their own perspective, is something that makes a lot of sense. That makes it's a phase of self-awareness. Because if as a woman I'm writing something that's connected with a man, and I'm telling that a man's life is a lot better, they don't make sense, and it's like, ধরো আমি একজন মহিলা, আমি এখন একটা বই লিখছি যেখানে আমি আমার ন্যারেটরকে একজন পুরুষ মানুষ হিসেবে রাখছি, এবং তাকে আমি নিজের মতো করে গোছাচ্ছি, এবং তার স্টোরিটা আমি নিজের মতো বানাচ্ছি, তার স্ট্রাগলটা আমি নিজের পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউতে করছি। কিন্তু একটা জিনিস আমি মিস আউট করে যাব, যে তার জেন্ডার অনুযায়ী বা তার সেক্স অনুযায়ী কিছু কিছু প্রবলেমস আছে, কিছু কিছু স্ট্রাগলস আছে, যেটা আমার চোখে কিন্তু পড়বে না বা আমার পার্সপেক্টিভ অনুযায়ী কিন্তু থাকবে না। ঠিক সেই জিনিসটা একটা ছেলের পার্সপেক্টিভ অনুযায়ী উইমেন যখন সে দেখছে একটা মহিলার লাইফ অনুযায়ী, মহিলার পার্সপেক্টিভ কিন্তু মহিলার জীবনে কিন্তু সে দেখতে পাচ্ছে না। ছেলেদের কাছে এখনও প্রচুর ছেলেদের কাছে কেউ যদি এখন জিজ্ঞেস করে হোয়াট ইজ পিরিয়ডস, ইট ইজ জাস্ট 5 days অফ ব্লিডিং, আর কিছু না, only 5 days অফ ব্লিডিং। নোবডি, মানে তাও এখন বলতে গেলে many people are aware of periods, কিন্তু for centuries before that people didn't even use the word periods. They use something weird synonyms for that. Also, when we come across women's literature, হঠাৎ করে মনে পড়ে যাবে জেন অস্টেনের নাম, বা ব্রন্টে সিস্টার্সদের নাম, জর্জ ইলিয়টের নাম। The first যে উইমেন রাইটার্স, তারা মানে কোনোভাবে আমরা উইমেন্স লিটারেচারটাকে খুবই স্টিরিওটিপিক্যালি দেখি, খুবই ন্যারোলি দেখি। ফর সাম রিজন উইমেন্স লিটারেচারটাকে আমরা এমনভাবে দেখি যে উইমেন আর capable of writing romantic stuff, not more than that. Now, this is a very much biased thing, because women have been again this is something that has been going on for centuries. This is a very much patriarchal practice. Women were not allowed to experiment in the other fields like science, like thriller, like detective. But if you see, Agatha Christie is one of the finest read, one of the popularly read detective fiction writers. When a woman writes, she's popularly associated with the romantic genre. Why is it that so? Why is it that women cannot write? Why isn't that women aren't associated with the science genre, the detective genre, the criminal thriller genre? any other genre other than the romantic stuff. This is also a very much biased thing, কারণ লোকজন often feel করে যে মেয়েরা বা মহিলারা রোম্যান্টিক স্টাফ ছাড়া কিছু লিখতে পারেন না, বা যদিও যদি লেখেন it's not as nice as the so and so men. This is something I would like to address about gynocritism, although I don't know if I have addressed fairly enough. As Showalter says, you can read about Showalter's book, a literature of their own, if I'm telling the name right. A literature of their own, from Charlotte Brontë to Doris Lessing. It's written by Elaine Showalter. You're free to read her book, because nothing is better than reading the book. I'm just giving information. And again, I think I'll leave some details about, I'll leave some links, I'll leave some names of women writers from different phases, from the 18th, 19th, and from the early 20th, 21st centuries, different times in literature. So if I have to wrap things up, I would say that this one thing that is very interesting, that the female phase, which is the last phase of literature, I mean the last phase of feminine literature, that was marked by courageous self-exploration and return to more realistic modes of expression. It is very interesting that this period of time, this period of literature, this period of women's literature, for example, this gave a lot of freedom for women to write about their own life, own experiences, own expression, because if you are not in that situation, you cannot really express in that. For example, if I'm writing about war, but I have not really seen a war, or I have not even heard of a war, or I have not been informed of a war, I think that somewhere I cannot relate to that, because war comes with trauma, and the trauma the war brings in is very much reflected in the book I'm writing. So it's same for any kind of literature. It's same for feminine literature, it's same for queer literature, it's same for any kind of literature. When you are writing about something, there are certain experiences that need to be dealt with it, and such experiences are very much that very much affect the writing that you are writing, that very much affect the book you are writing, or the poem you are writing, any kind of literature you are writing. So the main attempt of gynocriticism is it is focusing on the female framework, or the females part of women's literature. That's, as I said before, that how the female sex is creating women's literature. It's taking into account the female perspective, not the male perspective, and it takes into account the female language, their agency. The women are given an agency to speak about their experience, and it's all totally different literary theatre, because by creating scope for female literature, you're creating an altogether different career for women to write books and become authors, publish their books. So it's a very much a different career for them. So they are becoming more independent. So that's a very different thing. I would like to know if I would like to know in the comment section if I would like to have a very open discussion in the comment section to know about, to have more open discussion about gynocriticism and on feminism as a whole subject. Now, it's very important to understand those who I don't really want to describe what feminism is. It's just equality or stuff. But it's a very much, it's more than equality. That I'll explain in a different video of mine, what feminism is and what it isn't. So I intend to make this channel a more woman-centric channel, where I think I might come visit this channel occasionally and post some videos and like knowledgeify myself too, and knowledgeify others, if that makes sense. Because while I'm making these videos, I'm going through a lot of stuffs on the internet, and these are actually making me knowledgeable too, because I'm revising the whole things that actually come in for my exams. And if there are other topics that you all wish me to address, like other than feminism and stuff, I would like to, because as a student of literature, I don't mind studying a lot of things. What I mind is giving exams for that stuff, because it's a lot of things to study. You have to process a lot of things. You have to study feminism, you have to study Marxism, you have to make a different kind of analysis about that. You have to study different poems, you have to study different novels, different plays, a whole total analysis of them. So since the making of this semester system, I think it's a 6 months, a pretty short time to be studying all this as a master's student. But nevertheless, we can't do anything about that. So I think we are fair enough to the end of this video, and I think I make a different video on feminism and in general. So that's it.